Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're working on a 2012 Ford Explorer with a 3.5 liter non-turbo for a parasitic draw concern. Now this thing comes to us from the local Ford dealer who has already tried to put an RFA, or remote function actuator module, into this thing for this exact problem with no success. So I want to take you guys along on this, what for me was a kind of a long-winded diag. This one took quite a while to diagnose, to the point where actually there's pages of notes, and I actually wrote a lot of the steps down so I can share it with you guys on what was gone through on this diagnosis. Because at the end of this entire thing, when the car is sitting here fixed right now, I've captured everything along the way, but with the car fixed, we actually didn't have to put any parts into this thing. So let me take you guys along for the ride. So it was a cold, dark Monday evening when the car, no, I'm just kidding. We're not going to start that far back. We're going to start with this vehicle coming in and checking the thing and prepping it for a parasitic draw test, right? So open up all the doors, open up the rear hatch, open up the hood, trip all the latches, lock the doors. That's what I always do when we're dealing with a parasitic draw test. That's step one. Step two, we went ahead and put on an amp clamp around the battery cable on here, and we're going to look at the amperage being read through the negative battery cable to see what's happening for this draw. Let the vehicle go to sleep, and this is what we saw. Looking at the lab scope capture here, we averaged about 1.9 amps on our peak, bringing it down to, call it roughly 40 to 50 milliamps on our valley here. Now this looks like an intermittent draw, right? It looks like it's happening and then it's not, but if we average this out, it's kind of hard to tell here because we're looking at a ton of time on the screen, but if we average it out, we're at roughly 600 to 700 milliamps of a draw here consistently, right? When we peak and we have the valley, it averages out. So what exactly are we looking at? What's going to cause this problem? Well, if we look really closely at our pattern here, you can tell that it's almost too pretty for it to be random, right? It looks too consistent for it to be randomly happening. For a motor to be stuck, or a wiper motor trying to repark, or something stuck, or something running, or a bulb being lit, we would see a really consistent amperage value, maybe changing up or down a little bit, but not on and off like we're seeing right here. What we're looking at here, and I'll start to measure here with some cursors, we're looking at a draw that lasts roughly 18 seconds. We put two cursors up, we're looking at our delta here of about 18 seconds of time. Now if we move our cursor over to here, when we're not drawing, when everything is happy in the system, we're looking at about 42 seconds of time. Okay? So 18 seconds we're drawing, 42 seconds we are off. Now for those of you that are good at math, you'll add that up very quickly to a roughly 60-second window. We bring our cursor back over here to look at our second peak here. And again, we're at 18 seconds. And again, we are at 42 seconds. And again, if we zoomed in on this closer and we got our cursors perfect, we'd be looking at roughly 18 seconds on, 42 seconds off. Now that's consistent no matter how long you let the scope run and how long you let this thing draw on the system. You could let it draw all night. We're going to see 42 seconds off, 18 seconds on. Now that looks like logic to me. That looks like a module talking, waking something up consistently on some sort of timer. We're not looking at something being stuck on. We're not looking at a bulb being lit up, that kind of thing. That's not what we were looking at. So what did we do next? Well, let's take a look at my list here. And the next thing we did was your typical look, listen, and feel type of test, right? We got the shop quiet, sat in the car, and just listened, looked around, and felt things to see if anything was warm, to see if anything was acting up, to see if anything was consistent. When we saw the 2 amp or 1.9 amp spike, did anything happen? And the answer is yes, something did happen. The speedometer gauge on the cluster would kind of flicker at that 2 amp. When the 2 amps hit, the gauge kind of flickered back and forth. And then as the flickering was happening, if you looked at the rear HVAC, the little module for the rear HVAC, for the rear seats to be able to control their own blower motor speed and temperature, that the vent light would blink. The middle light on there would blink as well when this problem was occurring. Now, is that related? Is it not? That's what we needed to find out next. So we look into the instrument cluster, that HVAC module, and they're all CAN network controlled, right? So could that be the linking factor here? It seems like a reasonable thing to look into, right? Again, we're looking at what seems like module communication, right? We're looking at a consistent timed event occurring. So the next thing that we went ahead and did was scope the high-speed CAN network to see what was happening. So we go ahead and I'll bring that down into here. And you can see when the draw is occurring, we have the high-speed CAN network lit off. It's talking, it's communicating, it's chattering. It's not supposed to be talking at this point, otherwise it wakes the vehicle up and we end up with a draw condition, right? Let's go ahead and zoom in on one of these events. Maybe. Little too far, not far enough. Doop, 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 doop. All right, so definitely data packets here, right? We're looking at CAN network communication on there. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's see what happens here. So try to get to the front of this. So our draw is definitely occurring. Sometimes I miss Pico 6's zoom function. I should use Pico 7 more to get used to it. But anyways, we have high-speed CAN down here where it belongs. Something happens though. Something is causing an amperage draw gain right in here. And then the high-speed CAN lights off. So that's where we see our big spike in amperage, well over the 3 amp mark. And then we kind of settle in around what are we at here? Kind of settle in around 700 milliamps, and that continues to grow when high-speed CAN lights off. But we're definitely seeing an amperage draw occurring before the high-speed CAN is lit up. So what else is shown or part of the system when we're dealing with like instrument cluster? Well, if we look at a diagram for that, and can pull that up here. Actually, I don't have it pulled up, but if you were to look at a wiring diagram for the instrument cluster, you would see that it not only is on the high-speed CAN, it's also on the medium-speed CAN. So it just made sense that we would check that CAN network next. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that one in here. And it looks like our medium-speed CAN is talking first. So our draw is gorgeous. It's beautiful. No draw whatsoever when it's off, right? And then what happens? Somebody starts talking on the medium-speed CAN network. We have some data packets transferring here. Something happens here, and high-speed lights off. So the medium-speed CAN's not really causing the draw per se, but the medium-speed CAN network is communicating with a module who shares medium-speed and high-speed CAN network communication, which is lighting off the high-speed CAN, which is causing our draw to happen. So who's at fault here? Well, our next plan of action was to go after the medium-speed CAN network because that's the one that's talking first, right? It makes the most sense. Even though it might not be causing the large amount of amperage draw, if we can get the medium-speed CAN to be quiet, to go to sleep like it should be for the long amount of time, right? Not just 42 seconds. If we can get it to be quiet, it should make the high-speed CAN network be quiet, right? So that's what we did next. We started to isolate the medium-speed CAN network to see if we could pull modules out of the medium-speed CAN network to determine who is lighting off, who's talking when they shouldn't be, when they should be sleeping. So we went ahead and started to look at the massive amount of modules that are found on these networks, right? We went after medium speed. So we were doing things like the liftgate module, the amplifier, the RFA module happens to be on medium speed, the GPS module. We isolated the instrument cluster as well, pulling that out of the loop. All of these things were great in the fact that they brought our overall amperage draw down. We weren't at that 2 amp mark anymore, but the medium speed CAN would still light off every 42 seconds, start talking, it would start chattering, and then that would cause the high speed CAN to kick off and chatter as well and cause our amp draw to still go up. With the modules unplugged, it was lower, but it still wasn't there. When it finally went away though, when we got the medium speed network to be quiet, is when the RFA module was unplugged. Make sure I'm not getting ahead of my notes here. Okay, I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to turn the page. So we unplugged the RFA module and the draw went away. That's great, right? Okay, maybe it needs an RFA module. But remember, early on in the video here, guys, I said the RFA module had already been replaced. Now, it had a used RFA module put into it, but I don't feel good about condemning the RFA module again, right? So I wanted to try to figure out if the RFA module was actually causing the problem, or if somebody was telling the RFA module to turn on, right? So the RFA module, for those of you that don't know, is going to be in charge of pulling in a bunch of different frequencies, a bunch of different things from the vehicle. Let's look at the diagram here. So we have the intelligent access right up here. So this is intelligent access, push button start, that's all that means. Here's our RFA module, remote function actuator. On the network right here, we have power, we have ground, we have an internal RKE receiver, TPMS receiver going K-line into the module. And then we have some pins here for liftgate. Hood jar goes to the BCM. Not a big deal. RFA is powered by the BCM. Not anything crazy looking here. We get into what else this thing is doing. We have the keyless entry pad that's found on the driver's door. Intelligent access antenna for the liftgate. We have a passive start antenna for the front, the center, the rear, backup transceiver. We have a lot of different antennas, a lot of different radio frequencies that are being picked up by this RFA module. So is something telling the RFA module to turn on and start communicating? Is it picking up a frequency from somewhere? As we circled around this car, we found things like some sort of anti-theft protection, some sort of paint protection type of stuff. You guys have seen the little modules that hook up that are supposed to run a small current or whatever on the body to help prevent it from rusting or whatever. We see all these things on here. Could those be interfering with that RFA module? The RFA module wakes up, starts communicating, communicates with somebody who wakes up the high-speed network. That was kind of our thought process. And so we decided to start isolating the RFA module. Now, as we look at this thing, here's a little bit of a close-up shot. You can see there's a whole bunch of connectors in the bottom of this thing. What is that, 5, maybe 6 connectors in there? And the good thing is here, we can start to unplug these connectors, and we still had our draw. So we would unplug like connector A, which is coming from the exterior door handle on the left side, connector D on the right side. We could unplug these connectors, and our draw was still there. It wasn't until we unplugged the connector that contained our network communication, so pin 5 and pin 4 of connector E, and our power and ground to the module, that is when we finally saw the draw go away. We could run this thing with everything else unplugged from it, and our draw was still there. So it's not receiving any sort of weird signals coming in, telling the module to wake up. All we're feeding it right now is power and ground and module communication, CAN network on the medium speed network. In fact, we couldn't fully unplug the connector for E because it ran the K line for the TPMS. We actually unpinned or depinned the connector to remove that K line from there to make sure there wasn't any interference on there. So really, all that's going to this module right now would be power, ground, and medium speed CAN network, and the problem was still there. But what's really interesting is what happened when we would unplug the module and plug it back in. Is when the module was unplugged, when power and ground was unplugged from it, when the medium speed CAN was unplugged from it, the draw went away. As soon as it was plugged back in, as soon as it had power again, the draw would kick off. It would kick the medium speed CAN off, which would increase the draw a little bit, then the high speed would light off, and it would increase our draw a lot. We would unplug it, the draw would go away instantly, plug it back in, and it would kick off and do that again. So anytime the RFA module is being power cycled, it's lighting off medium and high speed CAN. So now what? Do we condemn a new used RFA module that was installed and programmed by the Ford dealer? And in this case, we would have been wrong. It was kind of back to the drawing board, kind of back to the research aspect, because I didn't feel comfortable with saying it needs an RFA module because it just, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. we went back to doing research, going and looking at different model years, looking at different things, and actually we literally stumbled upon a TSB. Now, I don't know if we didn't find this TSB, I'm going to be honest with you guys, if we didn't find this TSB, I don't know that we wouldn't have tried an RFA module. At some point, I think the decision would have been put onto this dealer to say, hey, do you want to try a new RFA module in here? I'm glad we didn't because it wouldn't have fixed it, and I'm glad we found this TSB. So this TSB here is TSB 13-6-18. The first thing I want you guys to note here at the top is this is for a 2011 or 2011 Edge Explorer or MKX. Again, sitting behind me here is a 2012 Explorer with the 3.5, okay? It is not a 2011. This TSB would normally not apply, but I'm going to briefly read through it here. But basically it's saying that the system with My Touch, so touchscreen sync module 2, touchscreen on the dash, and intelligent access, push button start, may experience an RFA module keeping the CAN network awake, causing excessive IOD and a dead battery. IOD, whatever that is. We're just going to call it a parasitic draw and a dead battery. An incorrect CAN message from the APIM, which is the accessory protocol interface module, call it the sync module. It's the brain box that sits right behind the touchscreen on the dash. An incorrect CAN message from that APIM may be causing this condition. APIM Vehicle Interface Processor version 2.27 through 2.2.7 and through 2.2.12 are affected on this campaign's levels. So you're supposed to check the APIM software level. So holding down on the eject button and hitting the seek up button brings up bezel diagnostics where we can go in and we can check the APIM software level. Looking at our APIM software level, we fall into that 2.2.12 software level. So even though this is a 2012, our APIM appears to fall within the need for this reprogramming, right? If we scroll down, it looks like we need to go ahead and program it using the scan tool through the PTS website. PTS website is basically the way that sync used to be updated when this TSB came out. In fact, we actually went through and attempted to begin programming this thing. The first thing that we tried to do a DIY version of an APIM update was we tried to reprogram the sync system on here. If you go to, I forget what the website is, if you Google sync update, you can download, or you can enter in your VIN number, download the software onto a flash drive just like this. You simply enter it in, click the download button, extract the file into your flash drive, plug it into the vehicle, start the vehicle up and let it run for sometimes up to 45 minutes. You can reprogram your sync system on these. Unfortunately, after we put the software onto the flash drive, did all that, reprogrammed it, it did not actually affect the software level of the APIM. As we rechecked it, the APIM software was still at the same level. So, and the problem was still there. We still had our parasitic draw. So the programming with the USB drive did not work. So now we had to get a little bit dirty on this thing. We had to get our hands deeper into this where we actually had to figure out how we're going to program this thing. So next step, my Ford dealer buddy came out with the IDS scan tool, or with all of his credentials for Ford, and went ahead and went through the program procedure on here through the Dealer Connect, through the PTS website, which doesn't like to work in Microsoft Edge. It tells you it has to work in Internet Explorer, which you go into Internet Explorer to do it, and then it crashes 7,000 times and doesn't work. So we actually ended up going into FDRS and programming it that way. Now, if you're not familiar, FDRS is intended for, I believe, 2018 model year and up vehicles for vehicle programming. It's kind of the replacement to the Ford IDS, and I suck with acronyms on the fly, but FJDS, I believe, was the aftermarket programming version. FDRS is kind of moving forward with that. So you wouldn't think it would work on this 2012 model, but it does actually work for sync programming. So we get into FDRS, put in the credentials, get into here. Right away, there is an APIM update available. run through the update, which does all kinds of wacky things like turns the wipers on, it turned the blower motor on, it had the speakers going, it was doing all kinds of crazy things during the APIM update, but it successfully completed the APIM update through FDRS. Now, went in, rechecked the software level of the APIM, and sure enough, it updated this time. Fantastic. Here's where we're at, guys. This is current on the vehicle. Amp clamps hooked up to the battery right now. We are at low line 16 milliamps. We have these little spikes in here going up to about 30 milliamps. That's probably a security LED or something like that is being run. I'm going to go ahead and up our time back to that large amount. As you see here, as we increase the time base, the scope for some reason gets really messy with the amp clamp. Oops. Let's go ahead and bump us back up to where we were before. But here we're looking at, can let this thing run and run and run forever. We are no longer 42 seconds off, 18 seconds on for our draw. Our draw is gone through a software update. So no parts replaced. The RFA module likely didn't need to get replaced on here, but it was a logical guess by the dealership at that point. I mean, if we didn't stumble upon the TSB, that's probably where we would have ended up next. It was just the logical choice. You kill power to it, you put power back to it, and it kicks off the network problem right away. It looked like the problem. Thankfully, we found the TSB, reprogrammed the APIM, and fixed this car. So I really hope you guys appreciated my long-winded storytelling of this problem, but I needed to tell somebody. I'm just excited that we fixed a problem through a TSB and a software update instead of trying some new parts on this thing. It's a fun moment when you get to be the one that solves it. So I really appreciate you guys watching. If you liked the video, if this actually helped you on an Edge, Explorer, MKX, please drop a comment below. I want to know the circumstances that you were in when you ran into this exact same problem. As always, guys, we really appreciate you watching. Smash the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. That way you can get notified when we come out with more awesome videos. Also, don't forget to check out our DIY channel. It's GoTech DIY. Check that out if you're looking for some more hands-on DIY style repairs. And don't forget to check us out on social as well at GoTech Automotive across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those fun ones. Check us out there. We're putting stuff on there as well. Really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. And as always, happy wrenching, everyone. Thank you.